Welcome back to Drawn to Darkness, a bi-weekly podcast where we discuss our favorite horror and true crime. If you have watched so much true crime that you assume every trash bag on the side of the road contains discarded body parts, we're here for you. My name is Annie, and I'll be introducing Caroline to my favorite horror movies, podcasts, TV shows, and books.
And my name is Caroline, and I'll be doing the same for Annie from the true crime side of things.
I wanted to start today by asking you, who is your most hated fictional character of all time? Books, movies, whatever.
Oh, shoot, I'm blanking on her name. The pink suit. Harry Potter.
Umbridge.
Umbridge, yeah. Dolores Umbridge.
She was on my list.
And especially because I love cats, and I hate that she took my cats. You know, like took cats as a thing that is hers when she sucks so much.
She has corrupted cats and used them for evil.
Yes.
Which is not right.
No.
And something that this show does too. That we're about to discuss, I just realized. Okay, so people who come to mind for me are Janice Soprano. My husband and I recently rewatched The Sopranos, and just every time she comes on screen, I'm just like, oh, I hate you. Jar Jar Binks. He's probably one of my most
not a villain.
Characters of all time. They don't have to be a villain. I said character.
Oh, okay.
Character.
Okay.
Yeah, I ask you who you hate because I don't know if I've ever hated a character, besides maybe Dolores Umbridge, as much as I hate Bev Keen from Midnight Mass, which is the show that we are going to discuss today.
Yeah, she's pretty hateable.
I got this flashback with Bev Keen to, I guess, the indignities of working at a restaurant like Applebee's. She reminded me of my manager. To quote the young people, she's giving Applebee's manager vibes for me. The false wholesomeness, that like plastered on smile while delivering some kind of caustic, horrific criticism, and that sense of power and control they wield over their small sliver of the world. Not all Applebee's managers, I'm sure they're not all bad, but just the idea of someone who wields that power ferociously with hypocrisy. Anyway, we'll get into all the reasons that we hate Bev Keen soon enough. But first, we are discussing Mike Flanagan's very talky, very beautiful, but also very scary series, Midnight Mass. Trigger warning, there are many. Miscarriage, fatal car accidents. You may want to consult doesthedogdie.com. I don't think there's a website for dead cats, but if you're worried about dead cats, that's there too. There's suicide, horrific deaths in general. I didn't personally find this anti-religious, but some Catholics might find this upsetting. It does arguably desecrate some sacred Catholic rituals. And for Friday Night Lights fans, Matt Saracen is in peril. If that's going to upset you, you might want to take care or skip this one. And Bev Keen might make you want to break your TV in rage or toss something at it. So if any of that's a problem, be warned.
I have a problem with the fact that there isn't a Does the Cat Die website, so we might need to take care of that ourselves.
There should be. It's not really fair, is it?
It is not fair.
Yes.
Maybe I'll save my rant on why cats get judged differently than dogs in another day. To be clear, for everyone listening, all 5 of you, I am also a dog person. I don't think you have to choose.
I'm both as well. I love them both. I want a cat so bad, but my dog would probably kill it. So, also, our discussion will be bursting with spoilers. So this is your warning to go off and watch it and then come back and listen up. So here we go. Mike Flanagan's Netflix series Midnight Mass is about a fishing community on an isolated island with a declining population that experiences miracles, a renewed sense of hope, and religious fervor after the arrival of a charismatic priest. But what is Father Paul offering? Is it too good to be true? Caroline, what adjective would you use to describe this?
Very ominous and sinister, but also oddly hopeful. I mean, dark is the most boring one I could think of because it's dark on many levels. Like I literally kept adjusting the light on my iPad, being like, why can't I see anything that's happening?
Yeah, I found it oddly beautiful as well. I agree with you, ominous, sinister, and dark and scary. I think it's very scary, but also I think it's really clever. It's thought-provoking, and yeah, I love it. I think it's one of my favorite shows of all time. It's up there. I love pretty much all of Mike Flanagan's work. Someone described it online as drama with a frosting of horror, right? It's deeply, deeply human-focused, and the horror is there, and it's pivotal, but it's not the only thing about it. It's about deeper things. Yeah. Guilt, atonement, grief, love, forgiveness, which is my favorite type of horror, just like The Haunting of Hill House. Mm-hmm. Did you like it?
I did like it. Yeah. I think I liked it the best of the things you've recommended so far, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Great. This might be my favorite of the things I've recommended so far as well. So I want to start with just how good is this? When I get ready for this podcast, I just watch whatever it is we're watching or read, and then I dictate notes onto my phone just as thoughts come to me. And I had 17 pages of notes when I finished this. So I was really struggling with how do I get this down to a reasonable amount of time so that we are not as long-winded as some of the monologues in this show. So there's so much to talk about. Character, literary and cinematic devices, biblical allusions like the Stations of the Cross and the books of the Bible each episode's named for, the connection between the plot and the lyrics of the different hymns in scripture. But we can't talk about everything, obviously, so I'm going to recommend the podcast Strange Indeed. The hosts deep dive on every single episode, so there's actually more podcast time than there is time on the show. There's probably about 10 to 12 hours of podcasting on this one show. So if you want more, I highly recommend checking out Strange Indeed. I listened to the first few, and they do a great job of analyzing every episode. Maybe we should talk a little bit about motifs and literary devices, because I think this is so sophisticated, like blood. Like when Hassan talks about how he wanted to contribute after 9/11, he goes to a blood drive. We have Aaron spotting before her miscarriage. Annie pricking her finger when she's sewing, which alludes to Macbeth, by the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes, and Snow White. And of course, the symbolism of blood and the ritual of the Mass. So there's so much deeper stuff going on when you are kind of aware of it. I think there's also the theme of darkness and light, night and day, sunrise and sunset. There's pathetic fallacy, which I'm about to teach Macbeth again, so these things are on my mind. But, the first time we see the vampire, it's a dark and stormy night, right? And that use of weather and location to create a sense of dread and impending doom. And the use of juxtaposition, like the beautiful Neil Diamond happy dancing scene where everything's just going well, and then it cuts to Father Paul doing something creepy to the wine, or Riley's final moments when the girl he killed is reaching out to him and then Aaron's screaming. I actually used a scene from this the other day. My students are doing creative writing and they have to perform a monologue. So I showed them Aaron's wing clipping monologue to talk about effective pausing and expression and gesture. And I was like, I just want to show them this whole TV show. I wish I had a spare 8 hours to just show them how to build tension and how to resolve a character arc and things like that. It's just so good.
Given this is my first watch, I was definitely more enthralled with the plot, less apt to write notes about extra complementary devices. I did notice the posters in his bedroom. I made a couple notes about Saracen's bedroom. I forgot his name in this. I'm so terrible about names. I'm really sorry. You're so good.
Riley.
You're so good with names. Occupational hazard for you, I think.
I have to learn so many names as a teacher. So.
I know, yeah. And I, as a mom of multiple children, should be better at it. But I'm not. Anyway, as I was saying, the posters. So I noticed he has a 7 poster behind his head as he's talking to his mom. And I was like, oh, that is very fitting for the whole theme of this. And then in episode 5, I think it is, when he stands up, he's got an X-Files poster behind him, and it's Scully. It really complemented where he was. He was much more down to earth in terms of his religious understanding at that point anyway, but I just thought it was so fitting, having studied all these other religions and understood sort of the device that religion serves, as opposed to the hopeful way that people try to utilize religion as being reality.
And Scully's the skeptic.
Exactly.
And he is the skeptic in this show, the counterpart to Father Paul. It definitely made me want to rewatch X-Files 7, and there's some other poster they had on the wall. I've got it written down somewhere. I'm not a film critic. Like, I'm not really good at analyzing things like camera work, but even I noticed that the camera work was really cool in this. There's the scene where there's like a long shot when they're looking at the cats on the beach, and it just is circling them, and people are kind of running in and out of the scene. And I thought that was really very cool. And also in the AA meetings, they do these kind of overhead shots of Father Paul and Riley, and then close-ups, and it just kind of goes back and forth. I noticed the camera work, and that's not something I normally pay that much attention to. I also think the characters and their arcs are just so amazing. I don't think there's ever been a show or movie I've seen that wraps up each character's arc so much more beautifully, except like Paddington 2. Paddington 2, every character has a perfect arc. But yeah, there's just so many good scenes, whether it's Hassan's monologue about being a police officer experiencing post 9/11 racism, Lisa forgiving Joe Colley, Riley or Aaron's monologues about what happens after we die, Riley's final moments in the boat. It's just all so good. One great scene after another.
I think it's a great scene also, but can I say that I really feel like he should have had her be wearing a life jacket? Like, what if the boat burnt? You know, like he did burst into flames. So I did write down life jacket with like 3 exclamation points next to it.
Every time that a character rode out into the ocean, I was really worried about the currents, like just taking them somewhere and then being able to get back. And I know I was like, why am I thinking about this? They have greater things to worry about. But like, if you can't see the land, how do you know you're turned in the right direction?
Yeah.
So I was like, how's she going to get back? How does she know which way she's supposed to go? I had safety concerns too.
And I just didn't find the waves to be quite accurate for their distance to land as well.
Did you like the setting?
I did. I, again, much like It Follows, was trying, like, what year is this? It's a little hard to know what year, what coast. It felt Nova Scotia-y to me. But then at times I was like, oh, maybe it's Pacific Northwest. And I did end up Googling where he was from. And so I think it is Northeast inspired. But yeah, I thought it was a great set, very real feeling.
Yeah, it's filmed in British Columbia, but it felt very New England island to me. You know, like the creak of the boats, the gulls, the sun rising over weathered beach shacks, isolated and beautiful, but economically depressed because it's reliant on one industry. And it's a place that's dying. It needs resurrection, which is why Father Paul, I think, thinks he's doing the right thing. I thought it was interesting that people aren't even selling their homes. They're just leaving. It's the type of place a vampire or angel could infiltrate. And the isolation is why it's possible, but also the cause of its downfall, right? Or Bev's actions as well. It reminded me of Jaws, the insider-outsider thing, who's an islander, who's not an islander. And it also reminded me of Salem's Lot, which I only just recently reread. It's a Stephen King book, and Mike Flanagan was definitely heavily inspired by it because it's about vampires infiltrating a small town. And the town itself is almost a character in the novel, all the kind of simmering underbelly and tensions and how that contributes to the story that we are experiencing. I love the beginning of any horror movie, horror TV show, that just those signs that something isn't quite right, like the dead cat's washing up on shore, something unnatural is happening. And I just think the foreshadowing of this is so skillful. You know, we've got Bev messing around with rat poison in episode 1 in the supply closet, and that comes back in a big way by the end. How Erin has that monologue about her mother clipping dove wings and how her wings were clipped. And then Erin cuts through the wings of the angel. We've got Riley's dream about the sunrise, the Ash Wednesday Mass, where even Riley gets the ashes on his forehead. And by the end, everyone is ashes except Warren and Lisa.
Holy shit. I didn't even put together the angel clipping their wings thing. Actually, I wrote it down and I wrote down, she's talking about her trauma, and then he responds with his stupid dream. He's so selfish. Because, sorry, and all my love to this character as well, because he does redeem himself. But this show opens with a bang, right? And when he's praying to himself, and that EMT is like, while you're at it, why don't you ask him why all the kids end up dying and all the drunken douchebags walk away with a few scrapes? And I was like, boom. And then you see the family crying in the courtroom with their signs, and you hear he gets 4 to 10 years, and this young girl is dead. So I was quite angry at him in the beginning. It's kind of like there's a total difference between a situation you grew up in that had nothing to do with you and a situation you put yourself in. Not that both aren't traumatic.
Yeah, I think there's so much about atonement and forgiveness and how do we move on when we have done something truly, truly awful and caused deep, deep harm.
I was really nervous, actually, when he comes to her door. He's got this, like, smoldery, like, malicious vibe. He does this little lilt of his head that seems very out of character for the pure Riley and much more, like, kind of wicked in a way. So I was super nervous when that happened, even though it also turned me on a little bit.
So you're saying smoldering because of the way he was behaving, or just because you have a crush on Matt Saracen and always have?
It would be impossible for me to discern the difference.
Can we talk about how beautiful Riley is as a specimen of a man?
Please. Yeah, we can spend a few minutes on that. I just thought like he didn't even need to take his shirt off. You could see he was just like it was very the chesticles were very, very looking really good.
He is aged in the most gorgeous
Mm.
way. I mean, he was so cute as Matt Saracen, but like as Riley, I just love him. And at some point, we'll have to watch the full The House of Usher because he plays the young version of a bad guy in that. And
Well, that sounds hot. And I don't really, as I think you know, maybe our listeners don't know, I am not into blonde guys, but he transcended.
yeah, I think of myself as not into blonde guys. I guess my husband's got,
Yeah, you're
well,
married
it's
to
gray
one.
now.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did it remind you of? For me, it reminded me of church as a kid, like the lyrics of the hymns, the slow, monotonous ritual of the Mass. A lot of my memory is how excruciatingly bored I was, but I can still say those words in my head that, Father Paul is saying. I can feel the way the bells ring during communion. Like I can predict every word, even though I haven't gone to Mass regularly in a long time.
Another thing it reminded me of was my rec center basement. It was our church basement, and that's where all our middle school dances were, in a room just like that room. And also like all the kids partying on the beach at the beginning in episode 1. That is like my teenage years. I spent a lot of time sitting around a beach doing exactly what Warren and his friends were doing, but without the creepy cats.
Yes. I wish there had been cats.
I would have loved cats to be at our high school parties.
Hell yeah.
I would have welcomed that.
Yeah.
Having said that, there were enough probably sadists in my high school who would abuse them in a drunken state. So probably good that there were
I
no
think
cats.
the ones I went to high school or the ones I was hanging out with probably would have just tried to get the cats stoned.
I'd be worried about the frat boy show off by harming an animal vibe that some people would have had.
Mm-hmm.
Did it remind you of anything?
Well, funnily enough, pop culture wise, which is hard for me to make a distinction in my brain, it reminded me of Interview with the Vampire. There was a lot of similarities along the storyline, but also in my own experience, it actually reminded me a lot of going to a college where everyone was Catholic and I was not. I sort of thought that having gone through those years there and being so close to so many people who are Catholic that I would know these vocabularies and stuff. And I was shocked at how many things I was like, what? What word is that? When she talks about his garb or whatever, and it has a name. So it reminded me of that. It reminded me of feeling like an outsider.
Well, there's some definite outsiders in this show,
Right.
like Sheriff Hassan and his son Ali, and who goes to Mass, who doesn't, what makes you an outsider? Are you an islander or not? You're not born here, you're not an islander, to quote Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
You bring up Interview with the Vampire. It reminded me so much of vampire lore, which is funny because they never say the word vampire in this show, right? They call it the angel. But it reminded me of What We Do in the Shadows. When I saw the angel flying around, I wanted to yell out, "Yes!" and of course, Dracula, right? Like so much of this comes from vampire tropes, which go back to Bram Stoker. Like Dracula arrives in England after his voyage in the Demeter in a big crate, just like Father Paul brings the angel back in. I'm sure you remember the What We Do in the Shadows episode where they have to bring dirt to Las Vegas, I think. But one thing I think is interesting is that the angel or vampire-like figure in this is so different from our normal depiction of vampires. Like vampires are usually maybe seductive and full of the wisdom of hundreds of years of life. So they're suave and sophisticated and manipulative, whereas this thing was an animal, right? Like absolutely animalistic and bestial.
Yeah, they're normally hot. And this guy was not hot.
This was not
no.
hot. Definitely
No.
not hot. Yeah. Pretty icky thing. I don't think I will ever get the way it feeds out of my head. The way it's almost like sexual, the way he's, stroking their head and then he just breaks their neck and you hear that and it was just like, ugh.
Yeah. And also to your point about being sophisticated and suave, I do think about Tom Cruise's character in Interview with the Vampire. What's his name with the L? Anyway, he never would have fallen for no, just keep sucking me while I cut your wing. That never would have worked on any of those vampires.
No, because they maintain more of their humanity. And I guess this thing is arguably thousands of years old, right? And it's been in a cave for thousands of years, I think is the implication. So how much has its humanity degraded in that time as opposed to Laurent? Is that his name?
No, in Interview with the Vampire?
It's going to kill me.
Yeah, it's going to kill me too. It's not Laszlo. That's What We Do in the
No,
Shadows.
it's not Laszlo.
Uh,
It'll come to us.
Lestat.
Lestat.
I pressed Google and I didn't even look at the answer. Right when I pressed enter, I was like, Lestat. We did it.
You did it. I didn't do it. I got Laurent. That's close. I wanted to talk about just how clever this is, I think. And arguably sacrilegious for someone who's very Catholic, but I still thought it was clever. And Mike Flanagan, the director, is Catholic, so he was an altar boy. So I guess it's kind of like you have the right to make fun of your own family. As a Catholic, I think he has the right to tell this story. As I said before, there's so many religious aspects that you could dive really deeply into, but I want to focus on the idea of transubstantiation and the depiction of angels in the Old Testament and how Mike Flanagan merges that with vampire lore, even though they never say the word vampire. So what do you picture when you picture an angel, Caroline?
I picture, again, I'm doing terrible with names. What's her face in Lord of the Rings? Not Liv Tyler. The other one who's in Ragnarok.
Kate Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett.
Like,
yeah.
Blonde, ethereal.
Her Lord of the Rings character.
I think I picture like the Renaissance angels you see in religious imagery, the white robes and the, serene face and blonde hair usually. But at the same time, if we actually look at the Old Testament, and as this show points out, angels were terrifying. People always reacted in fear. And the biggest baddie in Christianity was Lucifer, who was supposedly a fallen angel. Angels are warriors. Angels are the ones who slaughtered all the firstborn of Egypt. Angels are scary. And then we have vampires who can't go in the sun. They drink blood. They're immortal. They have everlasting life, is a more Christian way of saying immortal. Not all the tropes are used. There's the trope that a vampire has to be invited in, and obviously they don't do that. But that ties in with the concept of eternal life. And I think Bev quotes, I wrote it down, "Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. And whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood will remain in me, and I in them." So we've got these old words, right? Where did they come from? And it's the kind of thing that I've heard so many times in church. Take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is my blood. And you hear it so much from a young age that there's not much critical thinking. You're just like, yeah, okay, that's what we do in Mass. But drinking blood is crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take a step back from it and think, where did this come from? Why are we drinking blood? And why do we believe that it is the real blood of Jesus Christ, that transubstantiation, that it actually turns into flesh and blood? It's a horrifying idea. And yet we all, not all of us, but people who have grown up Catholic, just kind of, let it wash over them.
Yeah, I got to say, I found that very confusing. I did grow up Christian, but not Catholic. And we really fixated on the do this in remembrance of me. So it was like, this is a ritual that you do to remember symbolically something that happened before. When I found out, no, they think it actually, and I was like, but not really, right? I was just like, there's no way. It's a little nuts.
Yeah.
But you said two things kind of back to back that came back to, I guess, the primary reason that I hate Bev. There's so much gaslighting and selective behavior on her part. There's a point on episode 3 where she says there's a good deal of the Quran that people find offensive, as if there isn't a ton in the Bible. And she does say that after, but kind of as an afterthought. And she makes a quote at one point that says, you can't just pick and choose what part of the Bible you're going to believe in. And I'm like, aren't you doing that? You're literally doing that constantly. It's really insane.
Yeah, it's when she's trying to convince Wade and Sturge to get rid of Joe Colley's body.
Right.
And she's like, you can't cherry pick. I can't remember the line, and then she threatens him with you want to take your daughter's miracle away, and it's so harsh. And she's, oh God, I hate her so much. Let's talk about the list of Bev's worst moments at some point. One more thing I wanted to say about this concept of combining the lore of vampirism with Christian ritual. Arguably, in this world, vampirism explains the miracles recounted in the Bible, right? There is raising of the dead in the Bible. Lazarus is raised from the dead by Jesus. People with epilepsy are healed. Jesus comes back from the dead. And again, disclaimer, I'm not saying Jesus was a vampire. I'm just saying in this world. And we know that stories are passed down from generation to generation. They become misconstrued. They evolve. And in Midnight Mass, we're kind of seeing the immediacy of resurrection and healing. But, the stories of the New Testament were told after the fact. So is Flanagan proposing that there are no angels, there are misinterpreted vampires? And the ritual of drinking blood during Mass and the miracles recounted in Jesus' lifetime come from a vampire-like creature. Were Jesus and his apostles spreading this word, healing people several thousand years ago? I just thought that was interesting. I know it's not true, but where did this come from?
While singing a banging tune from Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes.
The Apostle.
What's the buzz? Is that one?
Yeah.
You want to talk?
No, I was thinking of
Yeah.
the Last Supper song when they're like getting drunk and they're like, always hoped that I'd be an apostle.
Oh, yes. That's a good one. Yeah, I think Jesus Christ Superstar is coming to my city. I kind of want to go. But I've just shared a couple Jesus Christ Superstar songs with my kids because we've been listening to Les Mis and they love it. And I was like, try Jesus Christ Superstar. And they said it's too screamy. There's a lot of screaming. They've got a point.
Probably 20% of his singing is just screaming.
All right. Last week, when we were kind of in the middle of this, I asked you if you'd cried yet, and you said no. And I want to talk about that because I cried so many times. I feel almost as emotionally drained after watching this as I did watching The Handmaid's Tale, which made me cry like every episode. And I stopped watching it for that reason. So did you cry?
No.
Not once?
No. I almost cried at one moment. And the reason I didn't cry is because I just so don't believe in any of this stuff being real that it's very hard for me to get into a place where I'm emotional. It doesn't mean I'm not enjoying it. I'm just not vulnerable, I guess you would say. I have a lot of walls up. But when he closes his eyes and he opens his eyes and the girl he killed is there, I did well up at that moment, for sure.
You're talking about in the boat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's such a good scene. Are you not a crier in general? Because I cry at commercials, and
No.
so I'm still surprised you didn't cry.
No, I am a huge crier. There's a joke in our house that mommy always cries at Bluey. Like every episode of Bluey.
Me too.
Every single one.
Yeah.
And I cry a lot, but the supernatural stuff I think just removes me.
Well, let's talk about the biggest gut punches. And I think we could start with that scene when Riley and Aaron are on the boat and he's obviously come to this conclusion that he's damned and he's going to sacrifice himself to make sure that she knows and that she believes, because otherwise nobody's going to believe him. And it's so powerful, just this idea of what do you do when you have done something as horrible as Joe Colley causing Lisa's paralysis or Riley killing someone. Even if you didn't mean it, you did it. How do you go on? And it seems like Riley's kind of actually starting to enjoy himself. It's like he has to step back because he feels guilty, right? Like he doesn't deserve good things anymore. And I think I quoted Frozen a couple episodes ago, and I want to quote Frozen again. Frozen 2, you just have to do the next right thing, which is a beautiful song.
It is.
And I think in this moment, he's doing the next right thing because he is moving past things. He's stewed in guilt for 4 years, literally haunted by the harm he's done. But he's rekindling this relationship with Aaron. And then in that moment, we all know what's about to happen, right? Like she doesn't. And we can see that what has been foreshadowed before, the sun is going to rise. We know this is going to be horrible. And it's beautiful for him, right? Reflecting his monologue about how when you die, it's like a dream and all these endorphins and chemicals are coming. And he feels, whether he is or not, he feels forgiven by the girl he killed. And she extends her hand and it's so beautiful. And then it's just juxtaposed with horror. We just switch to how Aaron is seeing this moment and he's just burning up in front of her. And it is just so beautiful and then so horrible. And also, I think, are they playing Nearer My God to Thee?
They are. I wrote it down. I was like, isn't that the song from Titanic?
Yes, which makes me cry in Titanic.
It does make me cry in Titanic. Yeah. Titanic, if you guys don't know what happens there.
Oh, it's so powerful.
I'm going to give us a Marvel spoiler. So if you all haven't seen, for some reason at this moment in the world, Infinity War, skip forward 10, 15 seconds. But I think you could argue that he saved the world just like Star-Lord is the reason that Thanos was able to snap his fingers. It's a small action that triggered a series of events that led to her cutting those wings. Just like him losing his cool was not cool.
That made me so goddamn mad that I like took it out on Chris Pratt. Like I couldn't separate the two in my mind. And I've grown to like Chris Pratt less and less as time, since Anna Faris, since he left Anna Faris, that's really bothered me. But yeah, it made me just overcome with fury that he couldn't put his own personal vendetta aside for the greater good, which is what Riley did. He did put his vendetta aside, or I guess he doesn't have a vendetta, but he did put his own needs aside for the greater good. And that's kind of the sacrifice that some people were willing to make in the show and others were not. And Chris Pratt was not able to put his personal needs aside for the greater good by abandoning his beautiful wife, Anna Faris.
I think she says Anna.
Anna? Okay.
But yes.
Anyway, he had a good thing going, and I'm still, what was that, like a decade ago, and I'm still mad?
I mean, we're still mad about Brad Pitt, right? So.
Of course. Yeah.
Till the day
always,
I die.
Always and forever. Yes.
I think the next gut punch, I don't know if you were going to talk about the dog next, but I was so angry. I did get sad, but I think I just refocused it on anger towards and just being like, that bitch did it, just like so angry.
Yeah. But you see Joe's grief, and that dog was the one thing he had in his life that was good. And it's so cruel. And Bev knew that. She's cruel, right? She wanted to take that away from him because she's the worst. My biggest gut punch, I don't know if it's the biggest gut punch, but the part that made me sob was when Lisa forgives Joe.
Mm-hmm. I didn't cry then as much as I was in awe, like admirably of her, because I had always been a person who's quite afraid of conflict, and especially to an adult. As a child, there's no way I would have ever raised my voice to an adult of any kind. I struggled to even do it with a peer, so I was so focused on her bravery and just feeling like, wow, what a badass girl she is.
And it's so real. Like, she's still angry and she's still upset and she still kind of hates his guts, but like she knows forgiveness will help them both despite that. And his reaction is like, the pain in his voice. He can barely talk. You can just see he's racked by grief, and you can feel that palpable relief when he kind of lets it out, when she's like, I forgive you, even though I hate you and I want you to suffer. She gives him that permission to go on, and it's really beautiful.
I mean, I do want to say, for the record, I am not a person who believes that you need to forgive in order to move on. Sometimes you can just forget and go on your way. Because sometimes I feel like forgiveness lets the other person off the hook in a way that you don't need to do that to them. You could just internally decide that person is gone for me, or that situation is over for me, and try to move on with your life. I don't think you need to necessarily do it in front of that person, because a lot of times I don't think offenders are like Joe or Riley. Like, I think people who hurt people don't care that they hurt you most of the time. But both of these men were obviously remorseful and worthy of the forgiveness that they were able to get.
Yeah. And I think they both suffered for what they did. And I kept wondering, why doesn't Joe leave the island?
Right.
And I think he's punishing himself by forcing himself to look at what he did every day, because you can't avoid her, right? It's 100-something people on the island. So I think there's this element of self-flagellation going on, that he's refusing to move on because he doesn't want to, because he knows he did wrong. And she finally gives him that opportunity. And that leads to me quite liking Joe, which again is why it's such a gut punch when he dies, because, he's finding his sense of humor. He's opening up to Riley. He's giving himself permission to be human again. And he has, I think, one of the best lines of the entire show. I wrote it down because I loved it so much. Beverly fucking Keen's Queen Evil Bitch Emporium, Embezzlement R Us Incorporated LL fucking C. I love that.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these people, and there's discussion about how desperate the situation is on the island, and not everybody can relocate easily or at all. So I get that. I also wondered why the family with the daughter in the wheelchair didn't relocate, because one of my first notes is it must suck to be in a wheelchair on this island, because I doubt anything is ADA compliant anywhere,
They did talk about their financial situation.
Yeah.
Right, like that they spent so much money on her. So maybe they just financially couldn't either.
Yeah, it's rough.
And then I found, when Joe dies and hits his head. And I wasn't expecting it to go like that. Like I was expecting Father Paul to actually bite him, right? And it's just so sad because he has successfully accomplished 24 hours or whatever of sobriety, and he's coming out of that fog of guilt. And that's when he becomes Father Paul's first blood.
There are some things that I think are forgivably unbelievable. Like, I just don't think a fall of that force would cause that level of injury.
I don't know.
Natural devices of Hollywood that you can look over for the sake of the story.
Yeah. Gut punch number, I don't know what number we're on, but another gut punch is when Aaron's baby's gone.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning being like, that's Annabeth Gish. She's got to have more to do than just being an OBGYN. And I liked her character's whole story as well, and kind of the reveal at the end there, but which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, that was crazy. And also when she goes to the mainland and has that appointment with the doctor there, you know, especially because being a true crime obsessed person myself, I've listened to and watched so many stories of women with these fake diseases, etc. So I thought that nurse did a great job of being like, I'm sure maybe you think you were pregnant, but there's no evidence here, and trying to figure out if she was having an actual mental break or just doing things for attention, you know?
She could have had a nicer bedside manner. I guess because we're coming from Erin's perspective, knowing she was, in fact, pregnant, that I thought that was a bit harsh. But yeah, you're right. Some people do fake these things for attention. So.
There's no explanation for there not being any higher elevations of any, you know, like you would just be like, you're wasting time and resources, you know?
Yeah. I did find that scene so ominous. You know, I felt, and probably everybody feels nervous. What if the heartbeat's not there every time they go for an ultrasound? And then the way Sarah, the doctor, turns the screen and, you know, there's just those hints that something's wrong. And I just found that really real and sad. And, you know, I think the grief of miscarriage is a deeper horror that could be discussed because it's this secret shame that people don't tend to talk about. But it is such a massive loss, and it's so sad. So I think that was another big gut punch for me.
Yeah. For me, I have a very close friend who at the 20-week scan found the organs were all on the outside, and so she had to do a D&C, which is now illegal in so many states here. And so she would have had to then carry her ill-fated baby all the way to term and then gone through labor, et cetera, in those cases. So I think, you know, abortion is healthcare. Just wanted to say.
Yeah, definite deeper horror that connects to what's happening in real life. Another big gut punch for me is the very final scene when Lisa says, I can't feel my legs. And, you know, you contrast that with the moment when she and Warren are just so like adorably in love and she's knocking on his window and spinning around in joy. And then you imagine her in that moment when she's just watching her home burn. She knows her parents are dead. She's an orphan. And, you know, both those kids, for as flawed as their parents were, not Annie, I guess she was very nice, but Ed, he was very repressed and not a very loving dad. But I think he was, you know, he showed his love in his own way. And Lisa was very loved by her parents and very supportive. You know, she talks about going for walks with her dad every day. And that was the moment that was taken from her. And so she's now an orphan. And at the same time, she's found out that the miracle has been rescinded. And it's just a big gut punch.
Yeah. I think the comforting thing is that it's shown very early on that he doesn't care. He has been, not that she should have her value by a man, but, you know, if she was worried about that extra element of losing this person she's just gotten so close to, they still have each other's support. It never mattered to him.
She'll still have Warren's love.
Yeah.
For sure. At the same time, though, she smiles because that's actually the way it should be. This miracle, you know, life isn't supposed to work like this. And it probably means the angel's dead, right? Because that ties in with the vampire lore that if you make a vampire and then the head vampire dies, it filters on down through the minions. So I think it likely tells us that the vampire has not made it to the mainland. Because if it had and it was still around, say 60, 70 years down the track, Warren and Lisa die of old age, they'd become vampires, right? Because the blood is in them. For this to be over, that thing had to die, but it also took away her miracle. Let's talk about some of the themes we haven't discussed yet. The Christian idea that suffering is a gift. Was this so much of an idea in the church when you grew up, or is this more of a Catholic thing?
No. No, not at all. There was never, ever any mention of hell whatsoever or anything about pain. I think the closest it came to was turning the other cheek.
which is links to Lisa forgiving
Mhm.
Joe Colley. There's definitely this idea in Christianity that suffering is good, suffering is the price of eternal life. Father Paul says that when he's manipulating his parishioners into, drinking the Kool-Aid in episode 6. Jesus suffered for the greater good. And so I love Riley's monologue about that. I think it's so powerful. Just these glib things people say, like, it's all part of God's plan, or when God closes a door, he opens a window. And that's something I've heard a lot. And sure, that's true if you don't get the job you want, or you don't get into the university you wanted to go to. But, just to go back to, say, Spotlight, if you were sexually abused by a priest, that's bullshit. If you are a child in a war zone, if you're dying of cancer, all these things are so trite. And, the idea that God works in mysterious ways and this is all part of a plan. And Riley says that's monstrous. And I have to agree.
I do too. And that's why I actually hate when people say that God is a woman, because I'm like, I don't think a woman would do this. Like, I don't think a woman would let babies starve. I think it's like Stephen Fry has a whole monologue about like what God creates child bone cancer.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think there can be reasons for things that we don't understand. I just don't think there's a puppet master on a string deciding who lives and who dies and based on how much we pray. I mean, that's cruel. That is just cruel. And it's manipulative.
Yeah. And even Father Paul says he admits it's hollow, right?
Mhm.
And Hassan talks about losing his wife to cancer when he's trying to convince Ali not to go to church. He's like, why would God give Lisa back her legs but let a child on the mainland die of brain cancer? And again, that's a good question, Hassan, right? He says it doesn't work like that. That brings up the question of who deserves a miracle. If God is capable of performing and choosing certain people and not choosing others, why only stop some suffering? God shouldn't work that way. And if it does, Riley's right. That's monstrous.
Right. Especially if God is helping your team win the Super Bowl or whatever, too. It just seems a little insane. But there's a great show called Afterlife, Ricky Gervais is in, who is an atheist and a very outspoken atheist. But it is quite beautiful, and it does allude to there being things more significant than your life on earth. There's a whole conversation he has with the woman who plays Philomena Kunk, if anyone's ever seen that, where she says, if there's no God, why don't you just rape and murder as much as you want? And he's like, I do. And she's like, what do you mean you do? And he's like, I do rape and murder as much as I want, which is not at all. It's not some invisible man in the sky that's making me not want to do that. I have no impulse to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have a morality without a God.
Right.
Or without organized religion. Can we talk about what each character does with their last moments of life?
Mm-hmm.
I think, acceptance is such a huge theme of this. When Father Paul is telling Riley how he's basically been gifted something from this angel, he has that whole, what is the poem? The acceptance, the grace to, do you remember what I'm talking about? To accept the things we cannot change.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. For AA,
yeah.
God, the serenity prayer.
Yes.
God, grant me the serenity.
To accept the things we cannot change.
Yeah. And the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes. And we look at the way each character dies and each character faces those last moments. Annie and Ed are singing and just being with each other, finding peace. I think Riley finds peace because he has a sense of purpose. He does the right thing. Hassan and Ali pray. Father Paul and Millie say goodbye to their daughter. But what about fucking Bev?
The best. The best. I loved it. I thought that was great. All of the singing, stopping too, was a really breathtaking moment. But I loved how panicked it's like, I forget who says it. It's Annabeth Gish's mom. Millie, who's like, you're a bad person. So just.
Oh, no. It's Annie says that to her.
Oh, she does.
Riley's mom.
That's right. It's Riley's mom. Sorry. She's like, you're a bad person, and all of your judgment and all of your whatever and all of your posturing, because you're rotten and there's no cure for that.
And boy, is she rotten in what she says in response. She just looking into her brain for what is the nastiest thing I can say here? And she attacks Riley. That must be a reflection on your parenting. And she's like, yeah. She refuses to be shamed by Bev. And it's just like, yeah, he is a reflection of me and I love him and God loves him. And yeah, I love that moment.
Yes. That's what I keep telling my son, my oldest, when his siblings are trying to push his buttons. And I'm like, they wouldn't do it if you didn't react. It's like, just don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction.
Another person who I think shows strength in death is Sarah. She's been shot by freaking Sturge. Made me so mad. And this is after Father Paul has realized the error of his ways. And even though he has seen the bloodbath in the church, he has said, we are the wolves. He still, in that moment, doesn't want to accept her death. He tries to feed her his own blood and she spits it out. And I was like, wow, so strong.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and that goes back to, our It Follows conversation as well. Like, what would you do in these moments? Would you become part of the problem? Like, no, sacrificing yourself like Riley and she did. Yeah.
It also reminded me of Toy Story 3, another moment that makes me cry, when they're all headed for the incinerator and they all just reach out and hold hands.
Hold hands,
because
yeah.
they've accepted their death in this very, very dark moment in a children's movie.
Dude, I've cried at all the Toy Story movies. I love that.
Toys talking isn't real either. That doesn't put you off crying?
That's a good point. But like, everyone has toys.
Okay, so it's more realistic to you than becoming a blood-sucking vampire?
I guess it's just like the relationships they have with each other feel real. I don't know. Because there are things in this that make it feel not real to me. Like, she has the scan and she calls the baby Littlefoot, which is from another movie that makes me cry. But then she's chatting with Riley later and she refers to her baby as Littlefoot. And there's no explanation about that. And I hate when that happens in TV or movies where it's like, that happened in a different scene. This character doesn't know who you mean. You say Littlefoot. Who's Littlefoot? She could just say Littlefoot. That's what I'm calling it. Something very basic like that. But I think in all of the monologues, as you said, too, those things also remove me because people don't do that in life. People don't sit down and say, oh, you think this is going to be better for me to investigate this? Let me tell you my 9/11 story. That's not a conversation that happens. It's just like, okay, thanks, goodbye.
And people don't not interrupt.
Right.
People interrupt each other all the time and they all just sit and wait.
We interrupt each other all the time and we don't mean to.
Constantly. Yeah. I think Mike Flanagan, I saw somewhere in an interview that he talked about like making the Dawson's Creek episodes that nobody wanted. And I was like, yeah.
Can I see a list of those? Yeah.
It was something he made in college when he was coming up in the world. And he talked about making something that he compared to Dawson's Creek. And I'm like, yeah, because Dawson's Creek characters don't talk like real people either.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
I only cried in the finale of Dawson's
Creek. You just interrupted me. Did I cry in Dawson's Creek? I think I probably did. I'm sure I did. Can we talk about Riley and Erin's monologues about what happens after we die?
Please.
Whose monologue did you agree with more?
Riley's, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Erin's second monologue about it, her continuation, I also thought had value. And I have some quotes that I wanted to refer to actually here. So I saw a great video of Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's talking about how the atoms of our bodies are traceable to the stars that manufactured them in their cores and exploded these enriched ingredients across the galaxy billions of years ago. We are definitely like connected to the cosmos biologically. And then there's also one of my favorite movies of all time, I Heart Huckabees. I don't know how many people have watched or enjoy that movie as much as I do, but there is a mention of the world, everything being interconnected. And Dustin Hoffman is a psychologist there, or I don't even know what kind of doctor they call him, but he's showing a blanket to demonstrate the world, the universe is a blanket. And he holds up the blanket and he's like, say this blanket represents all the matter and energy in the universe, okay? And then he pokes at the blanket and he says, this is me. And this is you. And over here, this is the Eiffel Tower, right? That's Paris. And then he's like, and this is a piece of string, and this is a love. He just sort of talks about how everything is connected, which I think is much closer to Erin's monologue at the end. So I think a marriage of those two.
Their imaginings of what happens are both what they needed for comfort in that moment. Like I keep going back to Riley wanting to serve a purpose. And by going back to the stars, by just being energy that's going back into the universe, he serves a purpose at the atomic level. And his life is so full of pain. Like he says, there's nothing left of me, no pain, no awareness, no memory, because his awareness right now is just that sense of guilt. And that's what he needs. Oblivion is comforting. Whereas for a lot of people, oblivion is horrifying, right? Like a lot of people want to believe in heaven so badly because the idea of nothing is the scariest thing they can imagine. But Erin, on the other hand, imagines love, rising to heaven, being surrounded by grandparents. And even though I find that too comforting to be likely, It's what we want to believe, not what is likely. It still made me cry. I thought it was really beautiful, and maybe we just need to believe that, and that's okay.
I never understood the concept of heaven because my mom would talk about it to me and she would say that's where your loved ones are or whatever. And there's no pain and everything is beautiful. And I would be like, how can everything be beautiful if you're watching people you love be in pain and suffer and miss you and you can't comfort them? That sounds like hell to me. I couldn't imagine, especially in the case of being a child of a parent and then you die and your parent is literally waking up in universal pain forever for the rest of their lives. That doesn't go away. They just get used to it. I feel like it's more likely that we are transforming into something we can't understand. And maybe there's elements of love involved in that and elements of the people you knew involved in that. But I can't imagine we're just like watching people cry and being like, we're doing great,
Well, yeah, in that final release of chemicals, you feel love, I hope.
I hope.
The way Aaron does. Let's talk about Father Pruitt. So Monsignor Pruitt, Father Paul.
I think he's such a perfect, cool priest because he wears jeans. Have you known any cool spiritual leaders and how it's like, oh, they're wearing jeans. They must be different.
Like that teacher in my so-called life who wore sorry. My youngest calls it mix match instead of mismatch.
Mix match. I like it.
Yeah. Anyway, that English teacher that was like a substitute teacher, he wore like socks that didn't match that were both wacky, like that kind of vibe, and you're like, oh, that teacher's cool. Yeah.
Cool teacher vibe. And those eyebrows, those dark, understanding eyebrows with his benevolent expression and his furrowed brow and, the way he lets Riley's scathing anger just flow over him. But at the same time, there's this uneasiness about him in those early episodes because we know something's not quite right about Father Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely makes me uneasy.
Victim or villain? What do you think?
Villain. When I heard his whole speech about, I thought if you'd leave him and I left, I just was like frustrated at the end, suddenly being like, is this just another like pissed off incel? Just thinking he didn't get the woman he wants so he can take down the world. I don't know. What do you think?
I didn't see it like that. I saw it as the horror of forced celibacy on priests, which results in all sorts of horrible things, but a lifetime of regret. He should have been able to have love and love his daughter and be happy. But because of the priesthood, he was not given that and he wanted a second chance. And that was selfish and wrong. But I also think he was deluded, right? He fell for this thing. When he meets this angel, he's got Alzheimer's. He's got dementia, right?
Yeah, dementia of some kind.
He's not thinking clearly. I think sometimes the mark of like an interesting villain is when they think they're doing the right thing. And I think Father Paul definitely thinks he's doing the right thing. He loves his parish. He's committed to them. He sees their economy dying. He sees that the island needs resurrection and people are leaving. So he thinks he's giving his beleaguered parish a gift. But he's wrong. He hasn't brought them miracles. He's brought them a monster. And I love seeing the mental gymnastics he's going through in kind of the later episodes, that this is all God's will. And killing Joe Colley and drinking his blood, well, I shouldn't feel guilty about that because look at what it says in the Old Testament and just how he chooses to see it the wrong way, to absolve himself of responsibility, which is interesting because in that earlier monologue during the AA meeting, he specifically says, well, no, we are still responsible. Saying it's part of God's plan does not absolve us of responsibility. And yet he does that later. He was wrong, but I don't think he's evil.
There is a ton of hypocrisy. For sure. I agree. Like, as we discussed when we talked about Spotlight, the celibacy agreement clearly is causing problems all over the place and should be revisited. I really don't understand why it's necessary, to be honest, but I'm also not Catholic, so I guess I couldn't understand. But I do think that many people who are villains think they're doing the right thing. There is a great true crime podcast miniseries based off a Dateline individual episode called Deadly Mirage. And there's a very Christian, I think they're more evangelical couple. All the time, what God wants happens to be what he wants. Like it's an easy trap to fall into that Bev also uses to judge the chief of police and his religion and anyone who disagrees with her.
Can we talk about that scene? Well, let's talk about Hassan. He's the chief Brody here. He's not a fisherman. He's not Catholic. He's not an Islander. He's a skeptic. He's the Marty Baron from Spotlight. Have you ever seen him in anything else, the actor?
No. Have you?
Well, he's in Bly Manor and The Fall of the House of Usher, which are also Mike Flanagan shows. And he's fantastic in both. So we'll have to do those eventually. Even though, as you pointed out, the monologue about post 9/11 racism is not realistic in the way he delivers it, I still think it was awesome the way it ends with, and you want me to investigate St. Patrick's? Like, it's the opposite of the reasons the Catholics in power in Boston Spotlight let the priests get away with things. They were too embedded, but he's too much of an outsider. I think my favorite Hassan moments are also just that he's the only person who's kind to Joe. And, Joe did wrong, but he needs somebody to be kind. And I thought that was sweet.
Yeah, I really liked him a lot. I like his explanation of the Quran, why he's not super happy with the Bible being passed out in school. I thought he was great. And I also, to mention Brody, I actually wrote down, is this mayor like the mayor in Jaws? When he's like, we need to it could be contaminated with something, it could be disease. And the mayor's like, it's okay, everything's fine.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
Like the camera is going in circles.
Yeah.
Just like he's going in circles.
Yeah.
In that podcast I mentioned, the host, Rima, calls him Ned Flanders. And I was like, yes, he is such a Ned Flanders. And he's just like talking about this catnado aftermath on the beach. And he's talking himself in circles to convince himself there's nothing to see here. He's like the meme with the dog and fire.
Yeah.
And
This is fine.
This is fine.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say, like, the cat thing was my original, like, is this interview with the vampire? Because he was eating the rats, in the beginning of that.
Yes. So the angels started with the cats. You mentioned earlier that Bev's handing out Bibles at this public school. And I love that gotcha moment that Hassan has with her. He's starting to talk about the Quran and what it means. And then she's like, I don't think this is the place to discuss where our beliefs diverge. And he's like, that's it. And he traps her into admitting this is not the place for religion. That's exactly what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And it's so satisfying to see him get her in that moment. But it doesn't matter because you can't use logic with someone like her. And she ultimately wins because she doesn't have logic behind her. She has faith. And, these debates are being held all over the country, all over the world.
So when he saw his son drink the Kool-Aid, for lack of a better term, I really was very emotional at that moment because I just felt like he's already lost his wife and now this is his child and he's physically being held back watching this thing happen. And I really, really felt for him at that moment for sure.
That would be probably one of the most torturous things you could experience as a parent, watching your kid fall for a cult, an ideology that's resulting in him ready to drink poison for it and having to watch it. I mean, it's truly horrific. We don't have a lot of time to cover Sarah, but I did appreciate her scientific approach to figuring out what's going on. I liked that scene when she's like experimenting with the boiling blood and Aaron comes to her and is like, this is what just happened. I know it's crazy. I must sound like a lunatic. And she's like, well, I have something crazy to say too. And she's like, look at my mom, who looks younger than her by then.
Yeah, and that actress is quite a bit younger.
Let's move on to the character that we have referenced several times, Bev Keen, the Karen from hell. I thought we could count down Bev's worst moments, just like we talked about the gut punches. Yeah, I hate her so much. I think she's similar to something we'll be encountering soon, Carrie White's mom, who is also a religious fanatic, who's cruel and hateful and abusive. There's also similarities to Mrs. Carmody, who's a character in The Mist, who kind of uses religious extremism to manipulate people. And maybe we should do that in the future. What's one of your worst Bev moments?
Well, she killed the fucking dog.
Yeah, there's the dog. Pike. Poor Pike.
That was terrible. I thought the scene where Ellen comes to get cleaning stuff, your mom would save everything, and here you are looking for more, and she has to say, if it helps, there was no bottle at home that my mom couldn't finish,
Yeah, she's so pedantic and obnoxious. And Bev would have been a jerk to her mom too, right? She would have judged her mom for being an alcoholic, but now she's using this comparison against Erin to put her down for no reason, just for wanting to clean the classroom. I could barely contain my rage in that discussion. And that is like the least bad thing that Bev does, is being a jerk about the Windex.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she is also so blatantly racist.
She says something horribly racist to Hassan in the final scene, something about like not wanting to drink his blood because it would be dirty or tainted or corrupted or something.
Exactly.
I can't remember exactly what word she used, and then she calls Ali boy. But she doesn't even know the kid's name.
I was just like, did she
Yes.
say boy? Like, this person is giving up his life for her. And she doesn't even know his name.
She's so awful. And then she even manages to be petty when Riley's made into the vampire first. And like, she's jealous, right?
Mhm.
Which reminded me of Guillermo from What We Do in the Shadows. He just wants to be a vampire so bad, but like in a sweet way, whereas she was in a petty, jealous way.
Yeah.
I was really hoping Riley would overpower Father Paul and get her when he kind of uses Bev to show Riley how he has this urge to drink blood now, to show him the hunger. We've already talked about her digging frantically in the end and how satisfying that was. What about when she makes decisions about who's allowed inside the rec center at the end, and she rejects that guy because he didn't show up at church?
I just, like, did you not read what I think Jesus actually said? You know? The people whose feet he washed.
Yeah, she's cherry picking like crazy. Yeah, and then she throws that Molotov cocktail at Aaron Green's house. It's like, whoa. I mean, I don't know if I'd call that an escalation. I guess they already have had a poison of an entire parish and turned everybody into vampires. So it was a Molotov cocktail and escalation, but it was still unexpected.
And she doesn't even have the guts to do it herself. She's directing her peon to do it.
I was kind of hoping that Sturge would show a bit of backbone at some point.
Me
and, like, stand up to
too.
her.
Me too.
Just in general, I'm not into people quoting scripture to justify anything. And she just does it in the most disingenuous, manipulative way. Like half of what she says is scripture, and then she punctuates whatever she said with whatever book of the Bible. So she'll say something crazy and then be like, Deuteronomy, number. Ugh. And she uses it to justify violence.
That reminds me, actually, I saw this on social media. I can't remember which platform. It's a meme. It says, someone today asked me if I wanted to read Smash Mouth's All-Star, translated into Aramaic and then back into English. The answer to that question is always yes. So here is that translation. There was one who said unto me that the universe was going to cause me to tremble, that I am not the sharpest cutting implement in the storehouse. She had the appearance unto me as a stupid one, with her finger and her thumb in the frame of a Greek gamma upon her forehead. Behold, the years begin coming, and do not cease from coming. Fed unto the axioms, and I fell upon the earth and ran. You will know if you do not go. You will not shine if you do not glow. Behold, currently, you are entirely a star child. Begin in your power. Go laugh. I mean, you have to remember, everyone, that this Bible was written 500 years after this stuff occurred in another language and has been translated and translated and translated. So you quoting back to me to justify your behavior means literally nothing to me. That was Smash Mouth's All-Star.
It sounds like a proverb where they say, like, behold.
Yes,
Don't
but it also
give
doesn't
me
make
your
sense.
Bible. Well, yeah, remove the plank from your eye. She talks about that at some point, and it's like, that's got to be a mistranslation somewhere down the line. But she uses it to manipulate Mayor Wade, for example. He seems like basically a good guy. He's kind of a nerd, but he loves his daughter. He loves his wife. He loves his church. But she uses all that scripture to manipulate him into doing something he would never do under normal circumstances, to dispose of Joe's body. She says Joe is a sinner, a lech, a heathen, a maimer of children, and let your little girl sit back in that wheelchair. You can't cherry pick God's blessings. And then ultimately she uses it to set the island on fire, which comes back to bite her, and thank God for that.
Yeah, she then proceeds to cherry pick God's blessings. Or try.
Absolutely.
You know?
Very big hypocrite. Let's talk about the scariest parts, since this is about horror. For me, I think the early appearances of the angel before we truly see it, you know, like when we've got the Jaws rule of not showing the monster too early, where it's thumping on Aaron's house, or Hassan is putting his son to bed and saying goodnight. He's not putting him to bed, he's a teenager. He's saying goodnight, then suddenly you see it, the eyes. So that got me, that scene, big jump scare. And again, one of my favorite horror tropes is just looking out into the darkness, not seeing anything, and then seeing movement.
Mm-hmm. Again, for me, a lot of the jump scares, I mean, I was watching it on my iPad and it was so dark. I think my iPad is also really smudgy. So I kept going back to try to be like, what happened there? And not really being able to see it that well. I didn't have a lot of jump scares myself because it was too dark for me to see.
Okay.
Honestly, the scariest moment was them being trapped in the church and just being like, where's the exit? How can we get out of here? Because that's a natural fear of mine. First, they're trapped in the building, then they're trapped on the island. And how do they figure out how to get out of there?
There was a moment that was similar to Pen Pal when Bull, the drug dealer, who's actually named Bill, goes into the house and hears somebody with his exact voice imitating him and decides to keep going. I mean, not to dehumanize Bull, but how high were you to go into that room?
I mean, yeah.
To that house?
It was such a long time where that kid was missing before it felt like for the viewer a long time between that happening and the mom having the conversation and none of the friends mentioning, like none of the people who buy from him being like, where is he at?
Well, that ties into things we've talked about in the past about who makes a disposable, dispensable victim, right? Like the horror starts with deaths that can be justified, right? Cats.
So true.
You know, a lot of people hate cats. Bull, the drug dealer, you know, he's probably hanging out with seedy people, so who cares? Joe Colley, the local drunk. Riley, who, you know, we see Riley as a human because we're seeing his point of view. But to a lot of people, Riley's that ex-con who got drunk and killed a girl, right? Like they don't see his humanity. So I think Flanagan is definitely challenging that narrative by humanizing Joe, by humanizing Riley, and by Bull's mother showing up to Chef Hassan to be like, when something like this happens, we're all supposed to be the same. And again, that contrasts with Bev, who ranks people, and to her, none of those people matter. And if you don't go to church and you don't take communion, you don't matter. Yeah, so I think that is part of the deeper horror beneath the surface. But Bull, why did you go in there? That was dumb. Let's see, what else was scary? When the angel gets Riley at the end of episode 4, I did not see that coming. I did not think Riley would be taken out so early. And, you know, when he walks in, he knows that Father Paul has lied. And then there's just this unspeakable clothed demon at the end of the basement. And it's that long shot and it just leaps at him so suddenly. And then like Father Paul just closes the door calmly, just as unflappable as he was when Riley tells him that God is monstrous.
I also did not expect Aaron to get grabbed that way. Like I was very shocked by that moment, and Sarah to get shot. I did not expect either of those.
And it gets Millie that way too, right? Because Millie shoots her former lover, Father Paul, and then the demon angel vampire just takes her out so quickly. So the power that it has when it chooses to use it is pretty scary. I mean, I think for me, the scariest moment is seeing those plastic cups full of poison. The way the tension rises to that moment, we're hearing Father Paul's cult-like sermon convincing his followers to take part in a mass suicide event. And the expressions on different people's faces, like some are all in, and, you know, you can see that Ed and Annie are like, this isn't right, Millie and Sarah, Aaron. But then you see Serge and Wade and I can't remember Lisa's mom, whatever her name is, Dolly, you know, that he's being so persuasive, talking about this leap of faith, just a small moment of discomfort to be reborn, suffer, sacrifice, like Jesus. And then it just hands to that back room with the plastic cups. And I just found that imagery so shocking and scary and so well foreshadowed too.
Yeah, there's a moment in the chaos where there's a mom with a boy and a girl in a pew. I was stuck in an elevator with my 6-year-old and 9-year-old. And the whole time, the most exhausting element of it was trying to keep them calm in the chaos and trying to make sure they are not worried and they are okay. And I was so obsessed with maintaining calm. And I saw that scene and the mom is just sitting there just like, she's just like, it's fine. We're just going to do this. And I was just like, whoop. Like it just blew my mind completely.
In contrast to that, there's like a dad who tries to stop the kid from drinking. Like it's just all these different reactions.
Yeah.
Like some people are like, yep, let's do it. And other people are like, wait a minute, no.
Yeah.
You know, your elevator thing reminds me of, I was in New York a few years ago with the kids around Christmas and we were trying to get to Rockefeller Center to just see the tree. And I have never been in a situation that was so crowded. It took us like an hour to walk a block because there were so many people. But once you were in it, you couldn't get out, right? Like there was no way out of this situation. And I was so tense the whole time. My kids were little and I'm holding their hands and I'm like, if somebody fell, no one would know. People are just crushing forward. And yeah, that reminds me of that horrific hell on earth, fire and brimstone scene in the church when everyone's trapped and losing control. And then they start tearing people out of their homes.
Yeah. And the mom and the kids, back to Titanic, reminds me of that it's like a contrast to that mom who's giving the old Irish tale to her children. You know, they're in third class and they're obviously not going to survive, and she's giving them a fairy tale to keep them calm.
Yeah.
And it's like a total opposite. No, this is fine. This is meant to be. Drink the Kool-Aid, you know?
Mm. Drink the Kool-Aid. Do you have any criticism?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have any that I haven't already kind of shared. Well, one thing that I really wanted to make sure is known, toxoplasmosis, that is not false. That is not a false claim. Please do not clean your litter box if you are pregnant. You are creating a body with your body. Let your husband clean the litter box. That is one major criticism I had, because I was like, there's no way that's true. And I Googled it. It is absolutely real. The other things were really, the things we discussed. The monologues made it feel unreal. It was too dark. So depending on what medium you were using, what platform you were using to watch it, some of the jump scares got lost on me. But other than that, I think there was a lot of like continuity was beautiful. In the beginning, I was so confused, like all these younger actors. I was like, why do they hire all these young actors and make them put on old makeup? You know, at the very first episode, I noticed it. So that was a criticism I have early on that is obviously clarified. I don't know that they really explained why the baby's gone, because that also doesn't really relate to anything I think in the Bible necessarily. Obviously, babies still get born with angels involved. Gabriel announces, obviously, a very important birth. But otherwise, no, not a lot. Do you have much?
Well, I think that the aging makeup was pretty bad. Like, could they have done a better job to make it less obvious?
Maybe.
And with the monologues, like, yes, I acknowledge people don't talk like that, but I don't care. I like every monologue, and I think they're beautiful. I understand the criticism, but it doesn't bother me. Overall, I think the show's a masterpiece. In reference to your question about the baby, I think it's that it returns you to an ideal age.
Oh.
Right? Like Father Paul,
But she looks
Millie
the
are
same
returned
age.
to this. Yeah, but maybe her ideal age was not that long ago. Or maybe it returns you to a state of kind of purity or something. And I'm not saying babies are parasites, but I think Sarah talks about that, how a baby is dependent on the mother and this blood thing is returned. And also, you know, vampires can't have babies.
Right.
Right? You know, that's why Edward and Bella, she has to not be a vampire right before she gets pregnant, I think. But yeah, vampires cannot, they can make new vampires, but they can't procreate.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it was about that.
These vampires don't glitter. That's, I guess.
No, thank God.
I know.
Well, that's an unanswered question. Do you have any other unanswered questions?
I don't think I do. The missing kids was my main question. Yeah. And we talked about that.
One question I have is, what's the end game when a vampire comes to town and turns everybody else into a vampire? Who do you eat? Don't you need to like do this slowly? And it's a common horror trope, right? In Salem's Lot, the same thing happens. Like the vampire comes and within a short period of time, everybody's a vampire.
But I think in this instance, as you said, this vampire is not like the classic vampires who are smart and sexy and whatever. This is a very animalistic vampire. So he's just like, food, food. He's not strategically thinking. He's just like, I need food. And so the way I took it was that they were going to eat all the non-Catholics on the island and then spread further and then just keep spreading. And then they'd have millions of people to eat before it became a problem. And obviously they don't care. I mean, much like many elected officials in our world today, they don't care what happens after millions of people are gone. It's not their problem. It's someone else's problem. So I didn't have too much of a problem with that, because it was clear to me that vampire was not strategizing.
No. Well, that brings me to another question I have is, how sentient and intelligent is this angel vampire? Like, it's been locked in a tomb for thousands of years. Does it just take the opportunity to use Monsignor Pruitt's mistake, right? And be like, okay, yeah, I'm an angel. Sure, I'll put on like the outfit and I'll use your rituals to share my blood and feed. But I just kind of wanted to know, how aware is it of what's going on? Because obviously when it feeds, it's unaware of almost anything. But is it planning with Father Paul? I don't know. There was just some, how much awareness did this thing have was an ongoing question I had.
I felt like it was about as aware as the dog. If you train it of like, you stay in this area and you do this thing or whatever, it'll listen. But it's not in control of any of it. It's unfortunate because, as you said, if this creature is like thousands of years old or even hundreds of years old, if it was smart enough, it would have found someone else to manipulate to have its great plan. So it's just a matter of poor luck on everyone else's part that it found Monsignor Pruitt.
Why do you think Bev poisoned Father Paul? Because I actually read somewhere that Mike Flanagan didn't intend for us to think that, which doesn't make any sense to me because the way he dies when he's resurrected, like he foams at the mouth, just like the dog.
Exactly like the dog. And she puts the thing
why
back
would
on
she-
the shelf.
Yeah, we see her handling the poison multiple times. But then I heard somewhere, I don't know, and I was like, what? Of course she poisoned him. But why? Why would she poison him? What do you think?
Is that before or after she sees the picture?
I'm not sure.
I think after.
It must be after.
Yeah, I think she sees the
Yeah.
picture. She just thinks something evil or crazy is going on here, and then she shifts.
So arguably, she was trying to kill him because maybe she wants power and she thinks he's doing something bad, but then she sees it as an act of God and a miracle and decides
Right.
to go along with it until he atones at the end and stops going along with her. And then she turns the scripture back against him. And my final question is it still alive at the end? What do you think?
No, I don't think so because of what you mentioned earlier about her legs. I was surprised it could fly away with that many holes in its wings, but no, I don't
But
think
we know it heals, right? Like it could be healing as it goes.
that's true.
Because Warren and Lisa throw fire on it. Like they'd set it on fire and then it's fine half an hour later or something. I guess how fast does it heal and how fast can it fly? Can it outfly the rising sun? I think it didn't.
Yeah, if it heals so fast, why doesn't it heal while she's cutting it or before she's done cutting?
I don't think it heals that
Yeah,
fast.
okay.
Now, a question for you. You mentioned to me early in your journey when we were just talking about this that you were surprised your husband liked Midnight Mass because it seemed pro-Catholic. And I don't know how many episodes you were into it at that point. Having finished it, do you think it's pro-Catholic?
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah.
Now I understand. My husband is very anti-religion. I was like, what? You know, when miracles started happening, that's where I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It ultimately does not. I mean, I almost feel like it's kind of neutral. It does show the beauty of some people's faith. Like Ed and Annie, I don't think there's anything wrong with their faith, but how it can be used for horror. And I saw online, and this is not my idea, so I don't want to take credit for this, but somebody said it's like alcohol. You know, Father Paul says at some point, well, alcohol is not inherently bad. It's how you use it or who you become. And Riley's like, well, I become somebody awful. But religion arguably is similar. It's how you use it. What do you think?
Yeah, because I want to amend my comment in that my husband is not anti-religion, he's anti-organized religion. So I think this does a good job of showing what individuals can do with faith. Because I will say one of the things that confused me, Catholicism versus my faith I grew up with, was this whole idea of this hierarchy to God, which doesn't exist in what I had. So I do feel like having these hierarchies and these celibacy agreements and other elements of secret really does create an atmosphere that lends itself very well to manipulation, judgment, and exploitation. Whereas if you feel like you are empowered as an individual to talk directly to God or talk directly to your deceased loved ones and have that, and yes, of course, just like people have therapists, you could have a spiritual guider that is a minister who could be a man or a woman and could be married with a family of their own. That can help you if you have questions, but there's no reason that you can't just do that yourself.
Yeah, overall, the show, I think, shows the horrors of religion, but also is respectful of faith and the comfort it brings people. And, you know, what you've just said about having someone who's a minister or a religious figure as kind of a therapist, but that person should be able to be married. I think this brings us to kind of the real horror beneath the surface. We talked about celibacy, and, you know, I think about when Father Paul reflects on the wasted years when he loved Millie. I suppose you could call him an incel, but I didn't see it like that. I think it was about loss. You know, and it's sad. And he said, you never felt like a sin. And our daughter, she was never a sin. She was never a mistake. So I think it's more about loss and regret, even if that relationship was never going to happen in Millie's mind. It's sad that the reason it didn't happen for him is because he has to be celibate. And he rips off his collar, right, in one of his final scenes before they kiss, I think, over the body of their dead daughter. He shouldn't have had to live like that. We've talked about other deeper horror, the separation of church and state, the grief of miscarriage. There's the impact of an environmental disaster on a community. Crockett is this dying island. And I think you can draw comparisons to towns in America that have depended on mining or a local factory. And when people are in economic distress, they look for solutions. And historically, have sometimes latched onto the wrong ideas. When you're angry, when you're depressed, when you're desperate, and you feel like you've been abandoned, you look for a strong leader, someone who offers hope. And that's how people can be harmed or manipulated by a powerful leader or powerful institution.
Yeah.
And we've talked about dispensable victims, gun violence. Lisa's paralysis is caused by gun violence and mistakes. It's just an accident, but it's still life-ruining, potentially. The impact of alcoholism. Mike Flanagan is a huge Stephen King fan, and they're both have struggled with addiction. So that aspect of the show is very personal. We haven't talked about this much, but, Aaron's mother's an alcoholic, Joe's an alcoholic, Riley's an alcoholic. So I think that's another horror that underscores all this.
Yeah.
Do we learn anything about survival?
I mean, not a lot of people survive.
Don't live on an island. Keep a separate boat if you live on an island.
Right, yeah.
Keep
Have
your
your
boat
own
locked up.
boat. Yeah. Make sure you have an escape route.
We both grew up in New England, not far from the beach. I lived in a town that had a yacht club, and certain people would want to party out on boats. And I hated it. I hated going out on a boat because I felt so trapped. If I'm at a party at a house and I want to leave, I can leave. But if I'm on a boat, I am stuck. And I don't like that feeling stuck situation. Watch out for the religious zealots. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. To quote my favorite murder, Karen Kilgariff, you're in a cult, call your dad.
Or your mom.
Or your mom. Or somebody. Call a trusted adult in your life.
Nobody intends to join a cult. Everybody joins this inspirational thing they think is going to give them the answer because they're in a vulnerable state. Mm-hmm. If you find yourself in that situation, that's when you call your dad, mom, or a trusted adult.
Get a second opinion on what they're offering. Because if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And, I think we've talked about this with Ghosts in the Burbs and just 1,000 other stories. There's no fountain of youth. There's no coming back from the dead. Don't make deals with the devil. Be careful what you wish for. All that. And don't burn down your houses, Bev. That was dumb.
So
you were hoisted by your own petard. Bad move.
In the best way.
Palate cleanser. What do you recommend?
Okay, so I Heart Huckabees, which I mentioned. If anyone hasn't watched it, it's very delightful. It's funny and weird in all of the ways that people who are darkness might enjoy. My husband and I quote it constantly in our house.
My palate cleanser is What We Do in the Shadows, the movie and the TV show, because it's vampires, it's all the tropes, it's turning people into vampires by getting them to drink blood, but it's delightful and funny. So I highly recommend both the movie and the TV show. Recommendations. If you like this, you should watch The Exorcist. There are definite allusions to it. I'm pretty sure in the book, the demon that possesses Regan is also released from a cave or a dig site in Iraq. So I think that he was definitely referencing The Exorcist there. And also the demon wears a fedora like the priest in the movie. Obviously, all the other Mike Flanagan shows and movies, especially Haunting of Hill House, it's so good. Bly Manor is amazing. Followed the House of Usher. Midnight Club was a bit disappointing, but I still liked it overall, even if it didn't maintain the quality that we have here. I mentioned Salem's Lot, also a vampire story. 30 Days of Night is this wild vampire movie about vampires infiltrating a small, isolated town in Alaska when it's dark all the time because of the time of year. So that's kind of fun to watch as well. Anything vampires. If you're looking for a more literary pairing, Hell is the Absence of God is a fantasy short story, maybe it's a novella, I'm not sure, by Ted Chiang, about terrifying angels who cause as much damage as they do good and who gets a miracle and who doesn't. There's a Korean horror series called Hellbound where angels decide the time of someone's inescapable death and the resulting religious hysteria and cult-like following that happens. So it's kind of cool. The Crucible, where religion and fear is also used to justify atrocities. We mentioned Seven and The X-Files and Scream. That was the third poster on Riley's wall. He had Scream. So that's another one to watch because Riley has all those posters in the room. So I'm guessing Mike Flanagan is a fan of all three of those. If you need some competition for the most charismatic TV priest award, Fleabag has the hot priest.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to Friday Night Lights to see young Riley, Matt Saracen, Clear Eyes, Full Heart, Can't Lose. Mystic Pizza to see the Dr. Sarah in one of her first shows when she's Kat. Also, Elliot from E.T. is Ed, so you've got to go watch E.T. again. It totally holds up, and it's got my favorite trope of kids in a small town riding around on bikes, which we see at the beginning of this as well. Obviously, Jaws. It's an island. The dynamic between Sheriff Hassan and Wade definitely is playing homage to that. There's a Stephen King short story called The Reach. It's about an old woman who lives on an island in Maine who never leaves until the day she dies. And it's not horror, it's really beautiful. And then The Perfect Storm for that kind of, people in economic distress reliant on the fishing industry. Do you have any other recommendations?
I mentioned Interview with the Vampire and I Heart Huckabees, obviously. I agree with your What We Do in the Shadows, amazing series, which you could spend a lot of time on. There's also a podcast called Passages that I guess describes smut novels normally, but they have one season that covers the book for Twilight. So I've never read any Twilight books.
Oh, fun.
But the first Twilight book is covered on this podcast, and that is a much more enjoyable way for me to think about putting myself through something like Twilight. So that's something I would recommend.
In Twilight's defense, Twilight was a fun book. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
They get more and more stupid, but when the first Twilight came out, there was a reason people were reading it. It's fun.
I think that's fair. I don't love so many messages from Twilight, which I think are called out very well in Passages. And to be fair, I was not a person who read it, so I am only basking in the glory of snarking it.
It is a worthy target of snark. Go for it.
Okay, good. Another thing I would recommend if you care about class action lawsuits, which are mentioned after the oil spill, is Erin Brockovich, which is an incredible film that if you haven't watched, please do. It's very, very good. I did take business law in grad school. It is really amazing that they were able to accomplish the minuscule amount that those families got compared to what they deserve. So it's a good story to hear.
Well, we've now had 3 Catholic adjacent pieces of media in a row. So, Caroline, what would you like to recommend as our homework assignment?
Obviously, the whole time thinking about this whole place that's ripe for resurrection, this place that's ripe for a miracle, this place that's ripe for someone to come along with all the answers. And then there was the Kool-Aid scene. And my first inclination was Jonestown. However, that story, even though it's worthwhile, we're not going to discuss it because it's just a bummer. It is just a tragic, horrible situation. So what we're going to discuss is a very adjacent cult, Heaven's Gate. So we are going to be watching the Heaven's Gate docuseries, The Cult of All Cults. We're going to have fun talking about this one. There's going to be a lot more to be like, what about in this one?
Okay.
In addition to Heaven's Gate, we have a summer special, partly because it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws, partly because we just love it, and partly because we've actually just spent a few days together in Narragansett, Rhode Island, a summer town that needs summer dollars. We want to do a special on Jaws next week. It will be mid-August. It's not too late to get your Jaws screening in for the summer, and then we'll be discussing it next week.
And buy yourself a case of Gansets for the watch.
Crush it like Quint.
And don't forget that we will be reading Carrie by Stephen King after that. So if you need to get started on that, that's coming up in the future. Mrs. White is a real Bev Keen. All right. Thank you for listening. Please do all the things podcasters ask you to do, like and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram at Drawn to Darkness Pod. Tell a friend who is also drawn to darkness. Write a review on iTunes. If, like Shirley Jackson, you delight in what you fear, join us in 2 weeks here at Drawn to Darkness.
Special thanks to Nancy Azzano for our cover art. You can find her on Instagram at Nancy Azzano, and special thanks to Harry Kidd. You can also find him on Instagram and Spotify.
Mike Flanagan's Netflix series Midnight Mass is about a fishing... Mike Flanagan's Netflix series Midnight Mass...
Fissioning?
Fissioning?
Sorry, continue.